Hi, everyone. I'm Todd Keats, founder, CEO of My Care Friends.
And I'm Katie Seymour, VP of Programming and Community.
We are excited to continue bringing you the Global Caregiving Youth Collective series, co-hosted by wonderful young adults from around the world who were young carers. It has received incredible response.
We hope you enjoy this episode and tune into our Get to Know sub-series to see the lighter side of these co-hosts.
Today, we are excited to have two special guests for this episode from the Elizabeth Dole Foundation's Hidden Helpers, a coalition that My Care Friends is proud to be a part of.
Thanks, Todd and Katie. Welcome everyone to episode 5, What No One Sees, the Practical Realities. Today we have two guests joining us from the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, Kylie and Seylah, and also my co-host Aditya. Kylie and Seylah, welcome to My Care Friends podcast. Would you like to introduce yourselves and a bit about your role at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation?
Yeah, so I'm Kylie. I am from South Dakota in the United States. I work with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. I was a hidden helper, which is a child who helps look after an injured veteran. And then I also transitioned into the adult role of a hidden hero, helping take care of my father.
My name is Seylah. I work with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. I am part of the Hidden Helper Advisory Council. And I just work with a bunch of hidden helpers, including Kylie. And yeah.
That's amazing. I know we have young care advisory groups here in Australia, one that I'm a part of, so it's amazing to see that there's similar programs in the US. So, in today's episode, we'll be talking about the responsibilities of being a youth caregiver or a young carer that people often don't see. So, I wanted to hear, first of all, from each of you, what are some of the caregiving tasks that you reckon people don't realize that young carers handle?
I think for me personally, it's sometimes I'm the only one that can help calm my dad down. So even though we have a whole care team helping take care of him, sometimes it's just that daily phone call of like, hey, just check in, let's talk about something unrelated just to help calm down. And so I think that kind of goes unnoticed.
I think the emotional labor does really often fall through the cracks because people only think of like practical or tangible assistance that you're providing. Thanks, Kylie.
And I think sorry, I was going to add on something because I'm just looking at how we present caregiving in the UK. And I think we always talk about siblings and sort of disabilities and perhaps long-term illnesses, but veterans is not something that we never really talk about. So, given that it's not something that comes to mind first when we're talking about was already perhaps a pretty niche topic, how has that reflected on your caregiving duties? How's that sort of affected your life per se, and how other people view your caregiving responsibilities?
I think taking care of a veteran is a little bit different because if you go back to that emotional side, you have certain triggers that can trigger certain emotions and how people tolerate. And I think every case by case who you're taking care of is very different. I know me and Seylah have connected about this on how we are very similar and we're both taking care of veterans, but we're all so very different at the same time.
Yeah, I think that our situations are so similar, but so different at the same time. Um, I've cared for my dad my entire life. Um, and I only realized I was a hidden helper at the age of 8 when I saw my dad have his first epileptic seizure. Um, and it just flipped everything upside down.
I think that's a really common experience. A lot of us didn't know we were young carers or youth caregivers when we were younger, and it took us until we were much older because there is a lack of awareness about that sort of terminology and the role that young people play in their families, supporting family members. I was also wondering, what do you think surprised your friends or your teachers when they found out you're a hidden helper or a young carer? Because these sort of tasks are often overlooked generally in society, but even those closest to us that we might see every day at primary school or high school, even they cannot notice the responsibilities we're managing at home.
In my personal experience, I was sort of embarrassed my entire life. And so my teachers didn't necessarily know. Only in elementary school, my nurse's office knew. I was diagnosed with PTSD and a panic disorder and a anxiety disorder as well. And I would have to go home 3 times a week because I would have a panic attack. And so my teachers weren't very understanding, I would say. Um, and they were more so angry with the fact that I was missing so much school. And with my friends, again, I was really embarrassed. And I couldn't really have friends over because it was the fear of, is my dad going to have a seizure? And am I going to traumatize my friends?
I definitely relate to that. I feel like as young carers, we get so used to like dealing with these confronting situations on a daily basis, but then you feel like you need to shield others from it. And I similarly felt like I couldn't invite friends over like all throughout school in case one of my brothers was unwell or if they had like a meltdown and weren't coping emotionally, that's really confronting and I didn't want them to think about my family any differently or think about me any differently. So I think that's a really common experience among young carers.
And I think the point about embarrassment is also really interesting because I think a lot of young caregivers also relate to that point. It's not even, I mean, for me personally, it wasn't even just embarrassment. It was also the idea that, they don't even understand, they might not understand, and any sort of misunderstanding could lead to a bit of awkwardness. Um, and so I think it's interesting to observe that we all have very different experiences, and yet a lot of the sort of outlooks when it comes to our social circles and kind of the impacts can be similar in certain ways.
Definitely. And I think it's interesting what Kylie and Seylah touched on before about how we each have such different experiences and unique experiences as young carers, but there are those similarities. I was hoping to explore a bit more what it's like caring for a veteran, like Aditya touched on before, and how that's different to caring for someone with an illness or a disability that might be lifelong. What was your experience caring for a veteran? Did you become a young carer later in life? I know, Seylah, you said you were quite young. And Kylie, I think it was similar for you. How did that experience of caring for someone after service shape your caring role?
Yeah, so my father's injury occurred when I was 3 years old, so mine has been lifelong and will be lifelong for the rest of my life. He requires 24/7 care with activities of daily living. So getting up in the morning, eating, brushing his teeth, like he cannot do any of that on his own. So I think it's really just being there for him and um just showing the support and being that shoulder to lean on and being able to talk through those hard days and it's okay, we're gonna get through this. We're a team. Like having a team is so, so important.
My father was injured before I was born, and he was close to a bomb and it blew up, and that resulted in a brain injury. And so he has epilepsy, and a traumatic brain injury, and that later developed into dementia. Um, so my dad needs help with a lot of things. Um, for instance, my dad forgets a lot and he has trouble even sometimes remembering our names, especially after a seizure. And so, really, just taking care of him and helping him with daily tasks after a seizure, making sure that he is He's given rescue medicine before another seizure happens, and just taking care of him all the time, really.
And I think a lot of the times, I mean, it's very, moving to hear, your individual experiences. And I think a lot of the times we kind of get bogged down on a lot of the physical tasks and responsibilities that we have as caregivers. But one thing I'm interested to learn about is what kind of emotions, did you go through? What kind of challenges on the mental health side do you think you've gone through, and how have you gone about addressing them?
Kind of bouncing off what Seylah said earlier is it kind of takes a toll on the caregiving team also. Like I was also had anxiety and depression growing up as a kid. As a caregiving youth, I think you mature a lot faster than your peers, and that's something that you don't really see until you're older, and then you look back and you're like, "Oh, my childhood was a lot different than someone else's." So, I think it's hard in a sense of you don't accept it right away because you're just a kid and you don't realize that that's your title. So, like Sayla said earlier, like you don't realize you're a caregiver until someone says, like, this isn't normal. This is your day to day, but this isn't normal for a kid. So, I think it's really just opening up to those kids that are caregivers and being like, do you need help? Like, what can I do to support you while you're supporting your person?
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Going back to my anxiety and PTSD, it was a real struggle trying to function day to day because every time my dad would have a seizure, that wound was opened back up. So like I like to use the metaphor like putting salt on a wound every time I see a seizure. And so my peers, like my family, just that support system is so important. And it took me so long to accept the fact that I am a caregiver and it's not embarrassing. It's who I am. And I really identify with the term hidden helper now. And I get to meet people like Kylie, which is amazing. And she's the best person ever, but also get to meet people like you. And yeah,
I think it's really important to have friends who understand what it's like to be a caregiving youth and to understand that caring role and what Kylie and Seylah you both talked about in terms of the constant need for care and being a part of that care team, sort of always feeling like you're on call or you could be required at every moment. Seylah, I love what you said about the importance of having that support system and that peer group. How do you stay connected with your friends when you're balancing so much at home and also, the personal challenges with mental health as a result of your caring role? How do you find time for connection to prevent the isolation that we so often see in young carers?
yeah. So I find what helps me most is therapy. Really having a space where I can go to and just vent everything helps create that space where I am able to continue to connect with my peers, not isolate myself, because that is what I used to do a lot. And it sucked. But once I got help, once I truly acknowledged my feelings and emotions and got the help I needed, I'm now at a space where I could even go to my friends now and say, hey, this is what's happening. I can't hang out today. And instead of what I used to think, oh, they're going to judge me, they actually send me all this type of love and even like treat me out to like lunch or ice cream or just something that will make me feel better.
That's so important to have those people that are looking out for you. And it sounds like you have a really supportive network. Kylie, what's your experience been making sure you're staying in touch with friends and having that support system?
I think it's kind of just like Seylah said, it's you have to be totally open with them. They don't understand the situation you're in because they aren't going through it. So it's like Seylah said, just the I can't hang out today and this is why. Like we're having a really tough day at home. I don't know how else to explain it. So I think just being open with your friends, sometimes they are over and sometimes they see things that maybe a typical friend wouldn't want to see. And I think you do truly find your true friends for those who are opening and accepting of who you are at home also.
And I think
Definitely.
that's really, oh, sorry about that. And I think that's really important as well because I think sometimes the best friends that you have as a caregiver might not necessarily have a full picture, full understanding of your responsibilities. And truth be told, I don't think anybody other than yourself can have a full understanding of your own responsibilities. But I think the best friends are those who always try to make an attempt to further their understanding a little bit more, but more importantly, try to accommodate that and sort of not just leave you alone and kind of just brush you off, which I know that I've had that experience a lot in the past, and I'm sure a lot of other caregivers have had the experience as well. But it's honestly, it's great to hear that, there is this sort of common remedy of going out and socializing with friends and finding those people that really mean a lot to you. But yeah, I just want to butt in, spread a bit of that wisdom.
I think that's so important. And I really relate to what you said, Seylah, about the importance of therapy and having psychology support. Because I feel like in my caring role, something that was really hard to process was like feelings of sort of inequity or like jealousy or unfairness. Having two brothers with disabilities, they got a lot more of my parents' attention and they had like a lot more time and support with all these medical professionals and that care team that Kylie was talking about. One of my brothers used to have frequent like care team meetings with all these professionals that manage every aspect of his life. And I think psychology can be really important to have that space where you can just rant. Like sometimes having a caring role does feel unfair. And even though I'm grateful to be able to support my family members in that way and how my caring role has brought us closer together, it can be challenging. And sometimes you're just like, why me? Like, why can't I be like my friends? Just hanging out with no responsibilities, having people over all the time. So I think it's really important that we have that social connection to sort of let off a bit of steam and have peer connection the way our friends do. I was also interested in what you talked about before, Seylah, in terms of feeling like you grow up quite quickly and that your home life doesn't look like what everyone else's does. I'd love to hear from each of you how you think being a young carer has shaped your strengths or how it's changed who you are.
Yeah, so I had to truly mature so young. Um, and I think having to mature so at such a young age, it honestly, I'm grateful now because I built this sort of like independence, and I feel like I just have this compassion that a lot of people don't have these days. And I do also, I've noticed a pattern within hidden helpers that a lot of us go into caring roles for our careers. Like Kylie, you're a nurse, and I'm heading to be a neuropsychologist. And someone else we know in the Hidden Helper Council, John, he's a paramedic. Like it just creates this sense of understanding and compassion. And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, I think compassion is a great word to put with hidden helpers. Nowadays, compassion can be kind of hard to find in people, and compassion isn't something that can be taught in a textbook. You can't learn how to be compassionate. Someone is compassionate to you and you want to return it. So I think it's just the willingness to want to go help people and being so selfless to try to help others first is just such a common thing within our hidden helpers. And even into the hidden hero role as an adult, like they're learning how to advocate for others that maybe this doesn't affect them, but they're willing to promote it and try to help the people coming after them.
And if I can just quickly ask, these are some pretty good. You've developed obviously compassion, maturity, and as you said, say independence from such a young age. How does that make you feel for your future, your individual future? Do you think it gives you a little bit more confidence, or how has that shaped your attitude and your outlook towards your life and your future ahead of you?
I would say that I have a lot of confidence about my future. Um, I became so independent from this experience, and I've had to, even though I had the support system, I had to fight through it myself from the age of 8. And so I have always known that I've wanted to be a healthcare worker. And it just kind of solidified as I grew up of I want to help, I want to return this love and compassion to others. And just being able to nurture and care for others is such a beautiful thing. And I'm pretty confident about what lies ahead.
100%. I think you nailed that right on the head, Seylah, that it just builds your confidence. You see yourself in a totally different role. You can see yourself maturing. Like I said earlier in this conversation of I look back and I didn't realize the things I was doing as a young child that I maybe shouldn't have been because I was a young kid at the time. And so I think as you get older, you get to look back and be like, okay, yeah, that it was pretty cool seeing what I went through and seeing how I grew from that.
I definitely relate to that. I feel like I was really mature and resilient from a young age. And that was often like endorsed by the adults around me. They'd be like, wow, you're so grown up for your age and things like that. And while I often didn't want to be grown up for my age, or I wish that that wasn't the way it had to be, now as an adult, I feel like it's given me a lot of skills. Like I relate to what you said, Seylah, about having independence because I moved out of home when I was 19. And I feel like if I hadn't had that caring role and been like cooking and cleaning and helping my family members with their medication and lots of those activities of daily living, really, that Kylie was talking about, I wouldn't have been so equipped to move out of home at a young age and look after myself. So I think it does also give you confidence within yourself that no matter what happens, you can sort of be there for yourself or you know that you'll make it through it because there have been so many challenges growing up. Aditya, was that your experience in terms of having confidence going into adulthood and the transition into university?
Yeah, definitely. And I think just to add on, I think the maturity, because I also experienced kind of this adultification at a young age, looking after my younger brother. Um, so some of my responsibilities are to, feed him, cook, look after him, look after his safety, look after his hygiene, dress him. And so that in making myself a bit more mature and confident, it's also kind of given me a sense of responsibility as well that I hold with myself at all times. And so I think that's given me a lot more maturity when it comes to decision makings. Um, and so I know not to, do things that I think may be a little bit unsafe, might have negative consequences in the future because, I have this sort of instilled responsibility of I need to be there to look after my family and I need to be in the safest position. I need to be in the best position so I can provide long term so I don't go out and do a couple of things that might put myself in danger. And so I think maybe that angle of what the maturity and confidence gives you is something to be discussed because it's also gives me the confidence to say no to things that I think would be detrimental. There's a lot of peer pressure, especially around my age, to do things that, might not be very beneficial. Um, different vices and different temptations. And so I think the confidence of saying no and say, because you have that reason and you're grounded in that sort of maturity, I think has been quite an asset. And I think it's definitely spurred me on to be a lot more cautious and to be a lot more responsible in the future.
I love that point, Aditya, because I feel like we talk a lot about the advocacy skills that we gain as youth caregivers and how we're really used to standing up for others or like working hard for people to get the support they need. But I haven't really thought about the ability to say no and to like hold true to your values. So I think that's such an important point. As we finish up, I'd love to hear from each of you. What would you tell another young person who's just become a caregiver? If you could go back, Kylie, and tell your 3-year-old self, Seylah, tell your 8-year-old self, what piece of advice do you think they should know?
I think it's just that you're not alone and you're gonna get through this. It may not seem like it in close quarters that there's a lot of people like you around, but especially having meetings like this and meeting someone like Seylah who's halfway across the country from me, like you find your group of people and you just adapt and you swarm right to them because they understand.
Yeah, exactly what Kylie said. You're not alone. That is so important. And I wish I knew that when I was younger. Um, because I felt alone, but in reality, I wasn't. And now I'm here today and being able to share my story and relate to a bunch of people that have also experienced something like me.
Aditya, what would your piece of advice be?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think one thing, this kind of touches upon what I just said about responsibility and saying no. I think learning to love and respect yourself is probably something I wish I would have done earlier because I think, and I'm not sure to what extent you relate to this, but I think a lot of my life growing up, I lived in sort of this kind of self-hate, this okay, I'm not doing enough, I'm not in a position to look after him well in the future. For me, my anxiety about my brother's always been how do I look after him in the future? I don't have much extended family. There's no one else to look after him. And so I think I put a lot of negative pressure on myself. And I think as I started to mature and get older, what I realized is the more I look after myself, the more I look after my health. And, the more I say no to things that are detrimental, the better it is for me. And as a result, I can be happy, I can be strong enough to look after my brother. And I think learning to, give yourself that respect, putting yourself on a pedestal sometimes, putting yourself before, you know, a lot of other things, I think is a really important skill and is a really important mindset for a lot of caregivers. And I think it really helped me a lot. How about you, Jack?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think self-care can definitely be overlooked when you are a young carer because you're so used to giving to others. I would say mine is there's this quote that is something along the lines of like, when you're born into a burning house, you think the whole world is on fire, but it isn't. And I think that's something that I wish I'd known when I was younger because as I've gotten older and grown up in my caring role, even though my caring role has changed and it's been more intense at times and definitely like fluctuated in intensity over the years, my ability or my capacity to care has also changed as I've got older. So like around the end of high school with exams, I found it really difficult to manage my caring role and like the stress of my final year studies. But also, I had my driver's license and now I live independently, so I get a bit more sort of time for self-care and independence away from my caring role. So I think it is important to keep in mind that even though it can be really challenging as a young carer, your circumstances and situations will change as your skills and your like life independence develop. So there is kind of hope and it's important to hold on to that. Thank you so much to Kylie and Seylah for joining us today and for being our very first guests on the podcast. It's been so incredible to have you and hear about your unique experiences caring for military veterans. And we hope you'll join us for our next episode, where we'll be discussing the often invisible emotional weight that young carers carry. Join us next time for episode 6, The Emotional Load We Carry. Thank you.